Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to IPFW's Mastodon Career Call webinars. We provide these webinars once a month throughout the academic year to free for IPFW students and alumni. And I'm really excited about today's webinar. It's focusing on resumes, and not only on how to build a great resume, but really what do recruiters look for on resumes. And we're lucky to have with us Abby Wilder. She's been with Lincoln for over 7 years. She's currently the recruiting site lead and has a lot of experience in HR and specifically what she looks for on resumes. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Abby, and we'll begin the webinar.
Great. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you very much. And thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. As Ashley said, we are going to be talking about resume review and specific things to do and don't on your resume, as well as what a recruiter or what I would look for in a resume itself. So just to give you a little bit of background, my name is Abby Wilder. I am the recruiting site lead at Lincoln Financial Group. Lincoln has been around in the community for a long time, over 100 years. It opened in 1905 here in Fort Wayne, Indiana. We have been long-standing in the community and as a financial services industry, as a company in the industry. We have 9 major office locations. Fort Wayne is the largest. We have 2,200 employees, and that includes contractors in our office building here in Fort Wayne. But we're also located in Radnor, Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Concord, New Hampshire, Hartford, Connecticut, Greensboro, North Carolina, Omaha, Nebraska, and then we have a couple other field location offices as well for our planners and agents. So I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation. As you have questions, please feel free to type them into the webinar itself, and I'll answer them either as I go along or towards the end. So just a little bit of background of why it's important to really focus on your resume and have a great resume to present. CareerBuilder did a survey a couple of years ago, 1 or 2 years ago, and basically what their findings were, they found that recruiters and managers spend about like 7 to 9 seconds per resume, especially if it's in an area where it's high volume and they're going through a lot of resumes. So if considering you may only have 7 to 10 seconds to make your case as to why you would be the best candidate for the role, you really want to make sure that that resume zeroes in on the very important aspects of the job and what skills and experience you can bring to that position. So just in looking at what your resume should be, your resume obviously should be fluid. Every new job should go on your resume the minute you accept the role. So don't wait until you're looking for a new position to sit down and write your resume and then go, oh gosh, what is it that I do day to day? What are my major responsibilities? The best way to do that is to take the current job that you just accepted, print the job description, and then highlight some of those key aspects that you'll be responsible for in that role, and go ahead and add it to your resume right then and there. That way you have an updated resume. You don't have to sit and panic about, oh my gosh, I got to write and update my resume. It's fluid. It's always up to date. You don't have to worry about it. Again, because you only have a couple of seconds in some cases to show that you are the right candidate for the position, you want to make sure that your resume is clear and to the point. Be very specific as far as take a look, again, at the job description that's posted with the company. Look at the key responsibilities and skill sets that that company is looking for. Think back on your experience and go, yep, I've done that, so I'm going to pull that and put that into my resume. It should be a reflection of your experience. It's you don't want to stretch too far, and if we're looking for a specific skill set and you think kind of what I did in the past is relatable to this, if it's too far of a stretch, then don't try and make it work. At the end of the day, we want you as a company, at Lincoln Financial Group anyway, we want you to be successful in the role if we do hire you. So don't set yourself up for failure by saying you can do something if you really can't. again, updated with correct dates. We at Lincoln, what we'll do is if we do make an offer to you, we will take a look at your resume, we'll take a look at your employment application and match up those dates because we do use the employment application for our background checks. So should you get hired, you want to make sure that your dates are correct because, you know, if they're not, we might have to come back and get further information from you, and that could just delay your start date. And so, again, your resume should be a mirror image of the job description as it applies. One other thing to kind of mention is it's pretty common to have more than one resume. You don't necessarily need to have, dependent on your skills and your experience, you may be someone who has 10 years of work experience, and if that's the case, you may not want to include every single job that you worked at on that one resume if that job is looking for a specific skill set. So you kind of want to pull out of your experience what is relevant to that job. And oftentimes I will see, as a recruiter, I'll see the same person, but they might have two different resumes out there on our website because they're making their resume specific to the exact job that they're applying for. So resumes and cover letters, do's. These would be the do's. So you want to make sure you have updated contact information. If you're a current or recently graduated student, you want to make sure to include your GPA. If it's 3.0 or higher, most companies that require a degree are looking for a 3.0 or higher as a GPA. You want to make sure that your achievements replicate those in the job posting. Always proofread your resume, and not only you, but have a friend or family member proofread it as well. The way that you might have entered something on your resume, someone else might read that and say, what are you trying to say here? So it's always a good idea to have someone else proofread for you as well. Include your education and graduation date or degree received. Objective, I'm neither here nor there on an objective. If you are going to provide one, though, you need to update it with each role. I don't know how many times I've read a resume that says, my objective is to obtain a job in the medical field. Well, we're a financial services industry. Unless you're going to move to Omaha, Nebraska and work in our group protection area, that's not really relevant to what I would be looking for here in Fort Wayne. Include a professional or executive summary only if your experience warrants it. So this is for the individuals who have a lot of background, a lot of experience. Maybe instead of listing, in their resume being 10 pages long, maybe you would add an executive summary and just in a paragraph or two really highlight and pull out those key things that we're looking for in a position instead of making me dig 10 pages back. We did have a question come in and someone had asked, can I just delete the objective? Absolutely. Again, like I said, I don't need an objective. Obviously, your objective is to obtain employment. I get it. Recruiters get it. We know that's what you're doing. So, yes, you may absolutely just delete the objective from your resume altogether. Fill out the names in your resume. So whether it's an employer or a school, no acronyms, please. I might refer to Lincoln Financial Group as LFG. But that could mean something else to someone else as they're reading my resume. IPFW, make sure you spell that out, especially if you're posting to a job somewhere outside of Northeast Indiana. They might not know what IPFW stands for. Keep an eye on your email and spam folders. Nowadays, the majority of Lincoln's communication is done electronically. A lot of the correspondence between recruiter and candidate is done is system generated, and it's done via email. So whatever email you include on your resume, make sure it's one that you're checking regularly because we're going to send you updates and we're going to schedule your interview through that email communication. Spend time on cover letters. If you're going to provide a cover letter, spend some time on them. You don't want them to be too generic that they just pretty much say, I really want a job with you. I hope you consider me. But if there's something in the job itself that you really feel is that you can pull from your past experience, but maybe it's not very apparent in your resume itself, a cover letter is a great place to make that, to kind of justify your case as to why you would be applying to that role. So you can be a little bit more specific in your cover letter, and if you're going to provide one, I would rather you be specific in it. Maybe you would say something like, you're going to see my resume that I worked here and there. What I really want to highlight is that from those experiences, I gained this, which I see is what you're looking for in this role, and this is how I can apply it. So kind of like what you would say in an interview itself, but just kind of nudging your resume along a little further so that it gets into those next hands. If you're being referred by an employee of that company, by Lincoln Financial Group, let's say it. Tell me that so-and-so referred you, or you used to work with so-and-so in a previous role. Maybe you went to school with them. In our posting site, in our career site, you do have an opportunity to indicate who referred you if you were referred by a Lincoln employee, and then you can enter their email and such like that. Part of Lincoln's benefits that we offer our employees, if they refer someone and that person gets hired, they get a referral award, which comes in a dollar amount that is nothing to sneeze at. So it's really quite nice. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what not to do. Again, I talked about email address. Whatever email address you're going to use on your resume, make sure it's an appropriate one, and it's not something silly. So if you want to keep your very clever email that you've thought of, that's fine. But for professional purposes and for purposes of finding a job, it might be a good idea to create a new email address and something that is a little bit more appropriate to the professional world. I don't want to see, and I don't want to say either if I'm talking to you and saying, okay, I have your email address as zippitydoo.day@gmail.com. That's kind of a silly thing to say. So please just make sure it's a professional email address. Also, the majority of people have cell phones, obviously, right now, and a lot of our initial interviews are done via the phone. So you want to make sure that your voicemail is also professional. If you have a ringtone associated with your phone, just make sure it is appropriate for your future employer to hear. If you leave a voice message as your voicemail pickup, then just make sure also that that's a professional message that you're leaving, or something very simple. It can be quite a turnoff to get someone on the other line who just comes across as being very unprofessional. So for resumes and cover letters, you can go beyond one page. As you know, and on here it says go beyond one page unless the experience is relevant. So again, if you're going to provide me a 10-page resume, I would rather you give me an executive summary and then just really pull out the necessary and most pertinent information based on your experience into that resume. Don't use lazy words such as etc. or same as above. If I'm taking the time to read your resume, that you are on stage at that point in time, and sell it to me. It's your chance to sell me why you are the best candidate for the role. So don't be lazy about it and really spell it out to me. Don't include graphics or logos on a resume. They don't help you at all. I like a nice, clean, clear resume that I can quickly scan, pull out the main information that I need, highlight that, talk to you in an interview, and then get you over to the hiring manager to be considered further in the process. All the other information is just not necessary. Another thing that sometimes we see is someone will go into our website, and at Lincoln, nationwide, we have something like 300 plus jobs available right now. And it's kind of confusing to us if you were to go in and maybe apply to 67 of those jobs, only because those jobs are going to be very varied, and it kind of tells us that you're not really sure what you want to do and you kind of don't care what you want to do. Maybe just make it a little bit more specific. I mean, if you want to get into the customer service role and you want to apply for each customer service job, that's fine. But if you're applying to an entry-level customer service role and an IT role and a business analyst and a project manager and an account manager, well, all of those roles have very specific skill sets, and it's kind of confusing to me as to what your exact skill set might be or why you think you would be a good fit for each of those roles. So be a little bit more specific. All right, so what do recruiters and managers look for? We look for the relevant experience as it pertains to the job. We're looking in most cases for the mastery level and experience level. We take a lot of time at Lincoln to focus on our job postings to reflect exactly what we're looking for in the role. So if the job says you have to have a degree in a certain field and or you have to have 5+ years of experience, you're not going to be considered unless you meet those minimum requirements. Because as we've market priced the job, as we've looked in the industry, as we've coached and trained our own employees in those roles, that's what we're finding you need to have in order to be successful for that role. To be successful in that role, you got to have that little bit of experience or that specific degree. I also look for gaps in employment. I will call you out and ask you about them. So if you have them on your resume, be prepared to speak to them. If you were laid off, you were laid off. I mean, that's very common these days, unfortunately, to happen as you advance through your career. Maybe you were fired from a role. If you were, I want to know that. Especially at Lincoln Financial Group, we are a financial services industry. We deal with some pretty sensitive information, and our clients need to trust us. So we need to ensure that we are bringing in trustworthy individuals. So if you have had something that's happened in the past, let's talk about it. I am going to ask you about it, so let's have that conversation. I will also ask you, what was your leaving reason from your last job? I want to see, was it to advance yourself in a particular area or career? Were you just fed up with where you were at? I want to know the thinking behind why you went from one job to another. Job hopping and career hopping. So job hopping is more like every year you change jobs. Career hopping is you went from the medical industry to the financial industry to the education field to here, there, and everywhere. I'm going to ask those questions. I want to know what made you job hop from one to another. I'm going to want to know why you changed direction so many times. So be prepared to talk me through that and help me understand why you went from one to another. We had another question come in, so let me just take a minute to read that. It says, what would be the best way to explain why you were fired without giving too much information? So honesty is the best policy. If you were fired from a role because you simply couldn't perform in that role, it wasn't a right fit for you, it wasn't the right skill set, it sounded great on paper, but then when you got in the role, you said, this isn't my thing. This really isn't my thing. Be honest with me. Just tell me that. If you were fired for gross misconduct, then that might be a different issue. We still need to talk that through to see if it's going to be a stumbling block or a roadblock to continue on down the path. But be prepared to be honest. We will conduct a background check if we do hire you, and eventually that will come out. So if you're honest with me in the beginning, instead of me getting surprised towards the end, that's always better for everyone, for you, the candidate, and for me, the recruiter. I think I had a couple other questions come in, so let me just look real quick. So another question, I'm sorry. What is the best way for me to present my reason for quitting 2 part-time jobs during school due to a rigorous program and having 2 babies? I don't see any problem in telling me just that. So if I see that you had 2 part-time jobs in 1 year, I'm going to ask you what's your leaving reason. And if the reason is, my schedule, I just found that I couldn't go to school at the same time and hold that part-time job, and then I made a decision to have a family. Those are all normal things that happen in life, and only you know what you can and can't handle. So if a job had to take a back seat, then that's okay. I mean, I don't see any problem in that at all. But do talk me through it. That helps me understand your reasoning behind, and it wasn't just that you abandoned that job and just said, forget it, I can't do it, I don't, never mind, I want to try something bigger and better. But I don't see a problem with, schedules come up. I mean, life happens, right? And then I have another question. Should I put stay-at-home parent, full-time student on my resume? I feel there are a lot of valuable skills that I've acquired filling these roles, but I am unsure if it's appropriate to put it on the resume. I don't mind. I mean, you can. I think that's better stated in a conversation. So if it's a big gap, like maybe it's a couple years that you were out of the workforce, I wouldn't mind if you put that in a summary or maybe in a cover letter. That's maybe an option that you would use. You could say, please see my resume. You'll notice some gaps in employment at that time. I took the time to be a full-time student or a full-time parent. I am now back in the workforce looking for full-time or part-time employment. I don't see a issue with that at all. But maybe just to kind of explain that a little bit better, I would maybe throw it on a cover letter, or you could put it in an executive summary. Or if you get to the point of in an interview and somebody asks you about it, that's just a conversation that you would have with your recruiter. Another question that came through is caregiving a valid response? And I think what you mean, if I say, what's your reason for this gap in employment, if I'm understanding your question, and you say, I took some time off to care for a elderly parent or someone in my family. That is very common, actually. I hear that a lot with our, the aging population of the baby boomers, and with the most recent financial crisis. That's put a lot of people into that situation, and there's nothing wrong with that. So yeah, absolutely, you can give me that as your response. Again, I'm just trying to figure out when I'm reviewing your resume, if you worked for 2 years and then you were off for 2 years and then you worked for a year. I just need to understand what happened during that period of time. Did you go back to school? Were you a caregiver? Did you have some other commitment that came up? I just need to understand that so that I know if I do hire you, what's the risk basically that you're going to come into the role and then leave us within 6 months. I have a responsibility to Lincoln to make sure that I'm hiring the right person in the job and someone who is going to be an advocate for Lincoln and wants to help us help other people. So you know what? It costs a lot of money to onboard someone from reviewing a resume all the way up to their start date, and companies just want to be smart about making that selection. We certainly don't want to waste your time, and you don't want to waste our time if you're only going to up and leave us, within a couple of months or so. Another question, I'll just keep answering a couple more questions and then we'll get back to the presentation itself. So I think the question it says, is it the same for the research field as well? So I'm assuming what you mean is if you take like a sabbatical to do some research in whatever field and then come back either to school or into the job market. that's fine. I mean, that sounds to me like it was something that you were working on towards bettering yourself to be a little bit more advanced or ready for your next job. So, yep, all great questions, all good reasons. Nothing that's going to, if we were having a conversation and I was interviewing you right now and those were the reasons you gave me, I would still move you forward. That's not a turnoff for me at all. Okay, so we're going to go to the next bullet point. The next one is lack of progression in job duties. So this can kind of go both ways. If it is a field where there would obviously be some career progression the longer that you worked in that role, I do want to see that. For instance, if I'm hiring for a program manager, I want to see that you were maybe a business analyst and then you were a project manager and then the size of your projects grew and then you were a program manager. That's the career trajectory that I'm looking for. That's the career progression that I'm looking for. If I'm looking for someone to be an account manager, I'm looking for you to maybe start out as a customer service rep, and then maybe you came in to be a technical expert, and then you came to be a plan document specialist, and then you came in to be in an account manager role. And then in that account manager role, we have different tiers, level 1, 2, and 3, as well as small market accounts to mid to large market accounts. So depending on what I'm looking for, I might be looking for that progression in your job duties or that career trajectory, excuse me, if it relates to the job itself. And then consistency of information reflected on the employment application. I think I already said that. So as a recruiter, you know, I was saying you want to be real honest and specific on your dates of employment and when you went to school and when you graduated on your resume, because I will match that up to your employment application for consistency reasons, because then we do move that employment app into the background phase after you've accepted an offer. And it's just important for you to be consistent and honest on that, because if you're not, then that can cause some hiccups down the road. All right, so let's look at a couple of resumes. The first one, this is just an example of what we might see for a more entry-level position, such as a customer service call center representative. You know, we are looking for someone with customer service experience, and then since this is more of an entry-level position, we might look, if you don't have necessarily a lot of experience in customer service, and it is more activities and awards oriented or education oriented, I might look to see under those activities and awards if you've taken on a big responsibility and have shown commitment through that responsibility. So even if you don't have necessarily job experience, you can show me that commitment and ability to handle a lot of responsibility in some of your other activities. Whether that was something, you know, through school, through IPFW, or if it was something to do with the community, maybe it's a volunteer program. You can really show that responsibility and commitment through a lot of different activities other than work experience. So this is just kind of an example of a nice, simple resume to see for something for a more entry-level position. So we had another question come in, and the question is, would volunteer work go under the experience heading, or would you put it under a different heading? I think I've seen them under both. If all you have is volunteer experience and no work experience, I would put it under the experience header. If you have a combo of volunteering and work experience, I think I would separate them. Either way, that would be fine for me, as long as it's clear. That way when I'm talking to you, it's clear to me what we're talking about, and you can explain it a little bit more, a little bit better to me. Okay, I got another one in here. oh, this one's a little harder to see. You'll have to make your screen a little bit bigger on that one. But this is maybe one that is a little bit more professional because there is some work experience on here at the management level. So this is something that we might see for a more professional individual. Maybe some of the alums would have experience such as this. And again, it's always great. I think there's some community activities on here that you can list. But real specific, like this would be maybe if I were applying, if Jane Doe was applying for a management position within Lincoln Financial Group, this is exactly what I would be looking for. I'm always interested as a recruiter to know how big of an organization you manage to. At Lincoln, we have opportunities for individuals to manage very small groups and very large groups. So it can be a little bit different if you've only managed 1 to 2 people as opposed to managing 15 to 30 people. It's a little bit different organization, a little bit different how you plan your day-to-day and communicate to that bigger group. And I want to know that you have experience in that realm. I had another question come in that said, how long are letters of reference good for? At Lincoln, we don't ask for letters of reference, but if you are going to provide one, I would want to see a recent one. Or I would want to see one from each employer. So maybe someone from each place of business. If you are someone who has a lot of work experience and are a professional, I would maybe want to see one from each place of business that you did work, or maybe more recent ones. Letters of reference, I'm going to be honest, are kind of outdated. These days we are going to LinkedIn. You can recommend someone on LinkedIn. You can view their profile. You can see what others are saying about that individual. So that social media is going to be a better reference than a traditional reference letter. And again, Lincoln we don't require them because there are other and more updated avenues that we would check first before we took that route. Okay. All right, so the next slide we're going to talk about cover letters. Cover letters, again, I don't mind them, but again, a couple things come into play. If you're applying for a job, and like I said, you know, if there are a lot of resumes flooding in because maybe it's an entry-level position, your recruiter might be only taking 7 to 10 seconds to look at that resume. More than likely, they may not pick up and look at your cover letter as well. For me personally, if you're going to include a cover letter, I do not like it as a separate document. Send it to me in one document. So, you know, you write your cover letter, and then on the next page is your resume. So all I have to do is scroll down. I honestly don't have time to open and close 2 separate documents if I'm reviewing 50 resumes for that job that day. So if you are going to provide a cover letter, again, you want to make sure you introduce yourself, state why you're writing, enthusiastically and present yourself for the job, state your background, what makes you the best candidate. Again, it's all about selling yourself. List a referral source if possible. That kind of goes back to if you know someone who works at the company that you're applying for, it might be a nice opportunity to say, you know, Jane Doe referred me to this role. We worked with each other in the past at blah, blah, blah. She really felt that my skill sets would be a right fit or the best fit for this role. Second paragraph, you want to list your value to the company, describe how you will contribute to the company. So this is kind of where you get into the nitty-gritty and you say, well, if your specific experience is not going to pop out to me as to why you would be a good fit for this role, maybe in that second paragraph there, that's where you would kind of explain yourself. You would say, you know, while volunteering at the Girl Scouts, I learned blah, 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 which I see is important in your job and important at Lincoln Financial Group for employees to have as a competency. So maybe something to that nature is what you would put in that second paragraph. Your third paragraph is always the call to action. This is just, your basic recipe for a cover letter. You're going to tactfully ask for the interview, or at least provide contact information. So, you can say, I'd like to schedule an interview with you. I'll follow up with you in 2 days to see if we can go ahead and schedule that. But you can also say, I would love to tell you more about my background and experience. You can reach me at this email or this phone number as my resume states. Thank you for your time. So here's just an example of a cover letter that kind of talks through what we just spoke about. So you want to, again, introduce yourself, provide a glimpse of your background, and provide maybe an example. So I'll give you a chance to just kind of read through that. So pretty to the point. Not a lot has changed in cover letters over the years. I will say this in addition to reference letters, the new cover letter these days it's in LinkedIn. It's networking on LinkedIn. You might find me on LinkedIn, see that I have a job posted either via LinkedIn or on our job posting site, and that introduction of yourself could come via LinkedIn. You could ask to connect, or you could maybe comment on one of the jobs that I've posted out there, one of the comments I've made, and that just kind of gets the conversation rolling. So again, certainly welcome to provide a cover letter. For me, if you're going to provide one, I'd like it in the same document as your resume, just one continuous document that I could scroll through. Otherwise, I'm on LinkedIn. We live in a virtual world, so connecting on LinkedIn is also a good option for a cover letter as well. So in today's market, there are numerous candidates applying for jobs. That is still true. That is still the case. The purpose of a resume is to get your information to the forefront of the candidate pool without compromising your ability to be successful in the role. That kind of sums up why we had the conversation that we did today. So again, it goes back to selling yourself. It goes back to, taking the time to really put some effort into your resume so that one pops to the forefront, and it makes me want to call you for an interview. And just a reminder that your resume is not the only information companies are gathering. Make sure you represent yourself appropriately on your online profiles as well. So your email needs to be appropriate, your voicemail needs to be appropriate, and your online profiles and your social media need to be appropriate too if you're going to enter that job market. If a company does hire you, you are now a representative of that company, and you want to make sure that you're giving a great representation of yourself and the company. So that concludes the webinar for today. If anyone has any further questions, I'll give you a couple moments to enter those. And then the last slide I have for you is just our website, Lincoln Financial Group's website, our career website. It's new and improved. If you haven't been out there recently, please go and check it out. We've taken a lot of time to make it a lot more user-friendly, a lot more appealing, easier to search for jobs, gives you a lot more information. We have full-time positions, we have part-time positions, we have internships. We are consistently hiring. As I mentioned, Fort Wayne is the biggest office location at Lincoln Financial Group, so we're always looking for those great individuals to come and join us. So we had a couple of questions come through. The first question is, how do you feel about follow-up phone calls after putting in an online application? You can make them. You can definitely call me. I will try very hard to get back to you. I don't know if I'll be very successful in getting back to you the same day or the same week. As I mentioned, we go through a lot of candidates. We have a lot of jobs available in the Fort Wayne market. We have a lot of candidates that we go through. When I said we might review 50 resumes for one position in one day, that's not an exaggeration. The candidate market right now, the candidate pool is very vast, and I am one of 2 recruiters in the Fort Wayne office at Lincoln. And so, feel free to call me and just say, I wanted to let you know I applied online. I am very interested. When you get a chance, please, if you want to talk, here's the best way to contact me. Maybe give me a time frame that works best. And then I will try very hard to get back to you. It doesn't hurt as long as you're not calling me every hour on the hour. And then another question came through about job fairs. How do I stand out at a job fair? That's a great question. The best way to stand out at a job fair is to come up to us and talk to us. Be specific. I'm going to ask you, when you walk up to me and say, hello, my name is Abby Wilder, I would love to come work at Lincoln, I'm going to say why. I'm going to say why, what interests you in Lincoln, what's your background, what's your skill set, what are you looking for? So the best way to stand out is maybe do some research on your part and say, I was on your website, I see that you're hiring for a customer service role, I do have customer service experience. Sell yourself. You cannot be timid. You have to put yourself out there and be comfortable talking about your background and experience, and be comfortable in answering some on-the-spot questions of why you came up to talk to me. So that's a great question. We do partner with IPFW. We come to their job fairs. We post our jobs on the Job Zone posting board here at IPFW. We have a great relationship with Career Services here. A plug for Lincoln, a plug for your career services. Please utilize them, as we do have a great partnership with them, and more than likely you will see it at every career fair here. Another question that came in, I have a couple of gaps. Looks like 3 years in between jobs, but I have been at the same job over 4 years now. Does that make those gaps less of a factor? Again, I need the explanation for the gap. I'm going to ask you. So it's not that it makes it less of a factor. I'm not really sure how to answer your question. I'm going to ask you about that gap, and I guess all of those gaps if you have a couple of them. So just be prepared to answer my question. And it does help, though, to show that you have some longevity at a particular company. So my assumption with your example is you were possibly laid off or the company closed. Again, we're still in the midst of a lot of companies getting back on their feet and a lot of people getting back on their feet. So if you can explain those, that's fine. I would be comfortable to see that you were with the same company for over 4 years. And again, that's a conversation we need to have. I need to understand what those gaps were, and I'm also going to ask you, you've been with the company for 4 years. What's your leaving reason? What would be your reason for leaving them now? So that is another question I would ask. So I would say as long as you're prepared to answer those questions, then that's fine. And I have another question. Do you prefer a thank you letter or thank you email after an interview? Again, you could do either. I've received both. One isn't better than the other. And feel free, just like that follow-up phone call, feel free to send me a thank you either via letter or email. I always appreciate them. It doesn't hurt at all to follow up with a thank you. I think in today's society we could be a lot more polite to each other in general. So I think it shows respect and courtesy and all the things that are important in the business world as well. The next question question I have is, when filling out online applications, often the reason for leaving does not include company closure. It just says quit, fired, laid off. Which is the option to choose? So I would probably say, so if you're applying at a company and your leaving reason is like a drop-down box and those are the only reasons that you can put, if a company closed, you didn't quit, and you weren't fired, I would say, that's probably more of like a job elimination due to company closure, which probably relates the best to being laid off. So I guess if those are your only options, I'd probably put laid off. And then if there's an area to put some commentary to that reasoning, you could maybe elaborate a little bit better. But if it's a drop down and it's the only option to choose, then that's, I think, being laid off due to company closure. Okay. One other thing I'll mention while maybe some of the other questions come through, IPFW has some great resources for its current students and alumni. I would very much strongly recommend that you utilize those services. The career services, they have great relationships with not only Lincoln Financial Group, but with other companies within Fort Wayne, Northeast Indiana, far-reaching. So I would definitely recommend you utilize those resources and tools that are out there for you. Oftentimes they'll have resume review sessions. They will have mock interviews. They're always hosting job fairs. Anytime you can get that additional experience of kind of putting yourself out there and selling yourself, it's a great opportunity for you. You're not in this alone. You don't have to do your job search all by yourself. It's all about networking, and your career services representatives are well networked within the community, and it's just another great way to help you get your foot in the door. Networking is key, whether it's face-to-face or via email or LinkedIn, or through some of the social medias, or with your career services group. I definitely recommend that you take advantage of those. So in the question box is our website. Again, I would totally recommend you go out and take a look. We've put a lot of work at Lincoln to make it a lot more user-friendly for you to see and utilize and really understand what Lincoln does and what's all available to you. As I mentioned, the Fort Wayne office is where it all began, and we have so many different departments there and so many different avenues and options that you can post into as an external candidate, and then as well as an internal candidate as you continue your career path at Lincoln. So I have another question that came in, and it says, if you are doing an employment check and the company went out of business, how do you do your employment check? So that's a great question. These days, most employers will utilize the work number, which is a third-party vendor that the company will provide the work number with the name of the employee, the dates of employment that they worked, and the title that they held when they were last there. So if a company went out of business, typically what their human resources will do is update the work number with that information. So if your company went out of business, 9 times out of 10, they are probably affiliated with the work number. And what our background company would do is contact the work number, get that information. Basically, then what we're doing is just making sure that the dates of employment and title you told us are correct with what their findings were. And the reason we would do that is if I'm looking for someone if I'm looking for a manager, and you told me on your resume you were a manager, and you told me in your employment application that you were a manager, and it comes back that you were a level 2 customer service rep, which basically meant you were a mentor to new customer service reps that came in, but you didn't really have management responsibilities. That could be an issue, because as a manager, I needed to hire you because you had experience with budgets, you had experience with scheduling, you had experience with training, coaching, providing counseling as necessary, performance review writing, writing business reviews and figuring out how to gain business and such like that. So if you didn't really have any of that, but maybe you mentored a couple people, then you're not really a manager. So we would just check that against whatever the work number had. If it's a company that didn't verify or didn't use the work number, maybe it was a much smaller company, we might reach back out to you and say, we can't verify this employment. Provide us with something that shows you worked there. Sometimes that's a W-2 statement or some other verification that you were in fact employed and paid by that company. That might be a route to take as well. We have another question that came in. It says, if you skip putting an objective on your resume, is there anything else that you would like to see instead? Probably if you're going to skip an objective, if you are a entry-level candidate and you don't have a lot to say, then I would probably just lead with my education and my extracurricular activities, as far as any student organizations you were a part of, or community events or something like that. If you are an advanced professional and you have a lot of experience, I would assume you would not put an objective in, that you would maybe put more of an executive summary in. And that an executive summary, again, just kind of pulls out, if you're not going to provide a cover letter or link in with me on LinkedIn, it just kind of pulls out that more specific and more relevant experience as it relates to the job that you are applying for. So like in the IT positions that I fill for, it might say, I need someone with Ariba experience or CICS or, whatever the case may be. If that's not reflected in your experience throughout your resume, then maybe in the executive summary you want to say, I have over 10 years experience working with Ariba, or whatever the case may be. So if no objective, then possibly an executive summary. So I think that takes us to the end. If there's any more questions that come in, then, looks like we're all set. So I want to thank you again for joining us this afternoon. Thanks for allowing me to present this information to you. Again, visit Lincoln Financial Group's website. You see it there on the last slide. A lot of opportunities out there, full-time, part-time internships. Myself and one other recruiter are the recruiters in the Fort Wayne office. Not only are we hiring Fort Wayne, but we also are hiring for those other key city locations that I mentioned earlier in the webinar. And I do encourage you to apply online, and we hope to see you at Lincoln.